Good afternoon, I'm Nigel Okins, the founder of Koktail magazine and the host of Koktail Conversations. And Koktail Conversations is where we try to find seriously interesting people that are doing great things for Thailand. And I think we found one here with me today. His name's Charles Toomey. If you've worked in the medical industry for any time in the last 10 or 15, 20 years, you might know him. But I'm suspecting a lot of people may not really know too much about Charles. So it's going to be quite fun learning what makes him tick. Before we start, I should actually say welcome, Charles.
Thank you very much.
We have a cocktail. One of the things we always do is enjoy a cocktail together in our discussions. And this, I believe, is called a sip of Italy. Actually, we shall enjoy it. I think it's rather quite nice.
That won't be difficult to enjoy.
And we're sitting here in the beautiful Four Seasons riverside. You can see, I think, out the window there, the pool and lovely area. So what better place on a Thursday afternoon, late afternoon in Bangkok to have a conversation. So Charles, without further comment from me, tell us a little bit about your early life. And now I'm going to prod you a bit because I know you left school at 18 and joined the military.
Yeah, well, that's right. So I was actually born in Scotland. So my mother and my parents were living out there at the time, and then up until the age of 12, I lived in Northern Ireland. But my sort of formative years, teenage years, were in Nottinghamshire. And I went to school there, and at the age of 16, I pretty much decided that I wanted to join the Royal Marines. And I figured that out because my parents used to get, on a Sunday, they used to get the Sunday Times and the Sunday Observer, and that was what we would read at home. And they frequently had these adverts in there for the Royal Marines. It looked like a really exciting thing to do, you know, parachuting, climbing, you know, running around the place, skiing. And I thought, that looks like a great fun thing to do, hardly looked like work at all. And it looked really challenging and exciting. And a lot of my friends, of course, at school were all planning their route to go to university. And I just was asking them the question often, why do you want to go to university and what are you going to do? And I always got the impression that the majority of them didn't really know why they were going to university,
just kill time,
or what they wanted to do, but everybody else was doing it, so follow the crowd. And I pretty much decided at that age that I wanted to join the Royal Marines, and I went to the recruitment office in Nottingham,
right?
The sort of Joint Service Recruitment Office, and went and spoke to a guy, and he was a Royal Marine sergeant, and I was interested in joining the Royal Marines as a Marine. And he gave me this sort of IQ test and said, finish this test and then come back after lunch and we'll have a chat. And filled out the test, came back after lunch, and he said, "You're quite a bright lad. You should consider being an officer." So to which I said, "Well, what does an officer do?" And cut a long story short, you know, I basically went down to Lympstone, which is the Royal Marines Training Centre, did an initial acquaintance for 5 days. I absolutely loved it. I was 16 and a half years old at the time, and then signed up, provided I could get, you know, get my A-levels. I signed up and I joined at the age of 18.
And the adverts gave this wonderful picture of skiing and you know, diving and doing all these things. Did it live up to that advert, or was that kind of...
So there's probably slightly rosier than it actually turned out to be. I mean, in reality, I mean, I did a lot of skiing and military diving, and it's not normally in sort of beautiful conditions. It's normally, you know, somewhere up in northern Norway or, you know, Scotland in the middle of the winter. So it's not quite as exotic, but I still found
still doing it.
I loved it. Yeah. I mean, I found
and
it
that
really...
kind of training is pretty arduous, right? You must have been well prepared as you went through that. How did you find that training? How arduous was it, and did that in any way help you in later life, do you think? Yeah,
it definitely helped me in later life. I mean, I learned so much, and from being trained really how to be an officer and how to lead, and being introduced to that whole concept at a very young age, and also seeing role models around you. There were some great people in the Royal Marines, you know, both non-commissioned officers and officers are some fantastic role models, and I was very fortunate to be working with people in that close company with them.
We're going to come to one of those close friends, or one of those people, I believe, the person that you started up the diabetes foundation for was a friend from those very early days, so that stayed with you.
Yes, well, certainly. I mean, I'm still in contact with a lot of people I was in the Marines with, and they've gone off in all sorts of different directions with their career, but we still have a lot in common. You know, I think the way we look at things, the way we go about.
So you did 11 years.
Did 11 years.
Did you travel the world?
Yeah, I really did. You know, I worked in in sort of Latin America, in Africa, in the Middle East and the Far East, and also obviously those times also there was Northern Ireland. So I mean, I was pretty much on the road for that 10, 11 year period of time, living and working in multiple parts of the world.
Were you seeing active duty?
Yeah, both operations and training tasks. And I mean, this is what really opened my eyes to working in, and working in other countries. And I always found it really fascinating working with different cultures, different organizations, and seeing how far, if you were training them, for instance, how far could you move them forward over a certain period of time. And I really enjoyed that. And I came to a point in my late 20s and was thinking, well, the next, from now on almost, once you get to your early 30s, you're going to become a staff officer. So you're not going to be operating so much on the ground. And I thought, well, if I'm going to be a staff officer, why don't I go and do that in business and have a new challenge? And that's basically what I did.
So after 11 years, you went out. But you went back to, you studied. You filled in the gaps in your study as well, didn't you?
Yes, I did. So I actually got sponsored by the Royal Marines to do a degree in international politics. And after being in the Marines for 3 years, I wanted to work in an industry that I thought was making a positive contribution to society. Now, I didn't know which part of the industry I might work in. I thought maybe I might end up running hospitals, or...
You always wanted to run something, did you?
Yeah,
I always to get into management
I like to
and be in charge.
Yeah, not just to be in charge per se, but to be part of something and moving things forward, working in teams, and making an impact through the activities. So I chose the healthcare industry, and then when I was doing my MBA, I targeted all these healthcare companies, and I was very fortunate. And one of them that they sort of thought I was a good candidate to join them, a company called Eli Lilly, which is an American pharmaceutical company.
Right.
And they brought me on board, and I told them then, I want to work in emerging markets. And they said, right, you do a great job in the UK for a few years in various assignments in sales and marketing and business development, and we will give you that opportunity.
And they kept that, and they took you out to Malaysia, was it?
Malaysia, yeah. So I came out to Malaysia in 1999 as general manager for the Malaysian business.
What was the biggest thing you noticed was different between talking to your colleagues in the army, in the Marines, and versus those civilians that you're now working with in the medical industry?
One thing was it took time to get used to was the level of commitment that I was used to. So people in the Royal Marines that I worked with, they were really, really committed to the job, and they really wanted to be the best version of themselves, and they weren't just there for the sake of it. Because you go there because you choose to go there, and you get through the training because you really want to get through the training. When you get into a unit, you really want to perform to your full potential. What I found in companies when I've often gone in at the beginning when I'm working is that there are some people like that, and there are some people who are maybe not exactly giving it their 100%.
So this is completely off the track here, but as you were talking, I'm thinking about there's been this debate recently between work from anywhere and work from the office, and Elon Musk has come on there and says, if you can work anywhere you like as long as there's 48 hours in the office, 40 hours there. And then the guy from Airbnb has said, you can work from home as long as you get the job done. I mean, I'd be interested to have your take on it.
Well, I think it depends, obviously, what sort of business you're doing and what type of company it is. I think my own view is if you have quite mature people who are really driven by their purpose and highly committed, remote working and coming together less frequently, I think is quite feasible, and it's something that really can work. But what I've seen is in some of the organisations I'm involved in, where you have a lot of young people, to just leave them out there sort of working from home or whatever, they never really pick up the culture of the company because they're sort of so disconnected from the company. So I think when if you have a younger sort of organisation, it is really important to have to bring them into the office and really engage them. Maybe it's not 5 days a week, but a couple of days a week.
Yeah, and I think the word that triggered that thought in my mind was I've been thinking about it a bit lately, and thinking that what you need is commitment from people, trust and commitment on both sides, and it's not everybody is driven like that. You'd say, oh, well, I was driven to do this and this, and not very many people are. If you're not driven, I think you'll find yourself, if you are working from anywhere, somehow getting left behind. You're not going to get the promotion, you're not going to get the pay rises, you're not going to be included in the big decisions and things. So I think for a career point of view, for people that are driven, you really want to at least have some of that time collaborating with your colleagues.
But I think if you're ambitious and let's say you're joining an organisation for the first time and you want to get into management, I mean, you have to basically be able to work with people, and just working with everybody remotely is a sort of surreal, and it's not really that realistic.
Yeah, my other view on it is if you're uniquely talented, you'll thrive.
Yeah.
But if you're just got a common skill, you're not going to float to the top. You might survive, and you end up being a single practitioner that delivers whatever you're supposed to do just in time or something.
Yeah.
You get me. So anyway, we're getting off the subject here. So then you went on to you found a new job after a certain period of time with DKSH. Right?
DKSH. So I joined DKSH at the time. It was still called Detail, but I remember even then at the toughest times, sort of relishing the challenge, and it seemed
and you sorry, but you did kind of grow with the company again. You kind of
So what happened? I ended up in that job for about 18 months, and then I was basically asked, could you come to Thailand and run the sales and marketing team of the healthcare business of DKSH here in Thailand, which was already about 600 people. So it's getting to become quite a sizable organisation. And that was a company at the time that also was undergoing a lot of change, sort of implementing a lot of new IT systems. Many of the senior managers who'd been there before were retiring, so it was a massive sort of organisational change situation in Thailand. And I then got promoted, to cover the whole of the healthcare business in Thailand, which included the manufacturing plant we had as well, and also all the logistics and distribution. And
was not happy with that. You got promoted again, probably to a regional job.
I did that for four or 5 years, and to be honest, we did the team, but we did a great job in Thailand. And I think my boss at the time, the CEO Jörg Volle, had seen that and thought, well, can we replicate some of that in the other countries? So I then was promoted to be the global business unit head. And I moved up to Hong Kong then, actually.
Right.
I mean, we had a really interesting journey with the company at that time. It was a private company, and then it became a public company. So we listed the company in the stock exchange in Switzerland, which was a real eye-opener for me. Sitting on the sort of sidelines watching this happen. I was meeting all sorts of people I'd never really come across, be like investment bankers, and people who focus purely on the sort of taking companies public. And I thought, this is another part of business I didn't really know about, and I got very interested in that as well. And I realised that I wasn't going to go any further in DKSH. I thought the likelihood is I was never going to become the global CEO. But there was no other role I could be promoted to, and I pretty much decided then that I wanted to go independent and actually start basically building up my own.
Did you have
businesses.
anything in your bag, as it were, at the time, or did you take a real leap of faith?
Yeah, I mean, I gave them 1 year's notice, so I didn't do a runner.
Okay.
I mean, so plenty of time. I'd recruited my successor, and he was ready to take over. So I managed my whole sort of exit plan, if you like, and succession planning. And I had a few ideas, and there was a few people I was talking to about we could maybe set up a business together, and they would maybe run it, and I would be the chairman, and I would help them get funding. But there was no piece of paper signed or anything. I basically left, and for 3 months I just enjoyed myself. I went, I saw lots of my family, did loads of exercise, and then step by step, I started to put these building blocks together of these various companies.
Did you have the ideas for the type of businesses you go into, and you were looking for them, or did they come to you?
I was looking for, the famous gaps in the market, because, and I realised when I was at DKSH, that we were a massive organisation, a big platform, but there's lots of little segments of the healthcare which no one was really concentrating on, or people weren't concentrating on so much. And relatively small if you compared it to a DKSH business, but actually could be quite big if you're going to set up your own enterprise. So the idea basically was find the gaps in the market and start and build businesses in those gaps. I also wanted to get into the sort of digital world, because this was the new thing that was starting to happen. And I consciously was looking around for opportunities in digital health as well. So I didn't want to just do just the traditional business I've been involved with before, like pharmaceutical, medical devices. I mean, I do some of that, but also I started looking and studying carefully the sort of the digital health ecosystem at that point in time, trying to find opportunities in there, in areas where I thought would both make a difference into society, but also would be a commercially viable business model.
One of them was called Hello Health. I remember one of the times we met was you were starting that up, or you just...
Well, I met on that one. I mean, it's a good example. I mean, I actually met the founder, who's a young British guy, you know.
Yeah.
He was 25 years old at the time. It's a great vision of building this platform across multiple countries in local language, providing information to people, which is understandable information around healthcare and health and wellness. And I thought it was a fantastic idea, both from a social impact, because so many people don't have access to information, meaningful information,
right,
which they understand about their health and health and wellness. At the same time, you know, there were commercial models around the world like that, like WebMD and Healthline in the US,
yeah,
which were viable businesses, but there was really nothing in that.
So you joined really early on, didn't
yeah,
you? In that, right?
I came in as
seed capital almost.
Yeah, I was seed investor. I mean, that's basically when I come into a company. I normally invest at that seed stage when there's a concept, and it's just starting probably, and you know, I've decided, okay, these are the guys I'm going to basically get in behind. Are the
original founders still there?
Yeah.
Are you still you're still supporting them? I know, I'm sure it must have grown. I mean, it's almost, if you like, the timing's been pretty good, isn't it? As people were stuck at home but needing.
I mean, they now have business in 9 markets. When I first started, there was 2, and just 2 very small businesses in both in Indonesia and Vietnam. I mean, across that platform, they have nearly 40 million users on a monthly basis.
Right,
you know, across all those countries.
And it's from memory, it's kind of helping you sort of manage your health at home via the internet, and providing solutions to you. And
lots of content there, and we're evolving. The business model is also evolving. You know, we started doing booking platforms so people can book appointments with doctors.
Was it a media company to some degree?
Yeah, I would say that's really where it started, and then you kind of. You get that place in the ecosystem, then start bolting on.
Building digital media companies is not easy from my experience. Yeah. So, but are they still? Are you still in that?
Yeah, very much so. I'm the chairman of it, and we employ now 360 people across all the countries. We're now in the process of actually planning to do an IPO that company.
Where would you IPO that?
In the ASX, which is in Sydney, the Australian Stock Exchange.
Right.
We looked at different stock exchanges, and you know, they all have sort of somewhat different way of looking at businesses, and we felt that there's quite a lot of interest in that type of business in Australia, and you know, I mean, there's a well-trodden path towards doing IPOs there.
I mean, I met one of the founders, I think.
You met James,
4 or 5 years ago. I was very impressed with him.
Yeah, very
kind of driven, kind of.
Yeah, really, he's got a lot of drive.
Just right out of your mold, right?
Yeah,
I guess.
exactly.
You saw something in him that
definitely. When I look at the companies, the first thing I look at is the people.
Yeah.
I mean. You know, there's always the business plans, and there's a lot of analysis that one will do, obviously from a business perspective. But the first step in my mind is: are these people that I really feel I can work with, I can trust them, and they're really going to put the effort in, because it's not easy. I think you'll know, it's never easy starting something.
No,
new.
You don't want people who might give up when things get tough. You know. And how many businesses have you? I saw 4 on your.
Well, those are the main ones. There's 10 actually altogether.
Are there? Wow.
There's 4 that I spend most of my time on, apart from my time on Action for Diabetes, which we come on to later. But there's 4 which are my principal focus. But then there's a couple of other ones where I'm on the board. I'm very actively engaged, sort of mentoring and coaching with the CEO, but not maybe so much with their management teams. On the 4 companies which I'm more engaged with, which is the Hello Health, the digital platform, a probiotics business, which is a joint venture with an Italian company, and a specialist pharmaceutical and medical device company. I spend a lot of time not just with the CEO and the founders, but also with the management team. So basically coaching and guiding the management teams of those companies.
I mean, your experience must be extraordinarily helpful to these guys, because one of the things you do need when you're a young startup is some sort of structure and some sort of discipline, I imagine. So
that's what they say to me. But I mean, I'm also can be probably I'm a bit of a pain in the backside sometimes, because you know, I'm pretty demanding, and because I really want people to be the best version of themselves, and I want the company to be the best version.
Are you still looking for? Are you just that's it? You've got enough on your plate right now.
At the moment, I'm not looking for any more investment. To sort of really the way I kind of approach that type of, or for the business model, if you like, is, you know, invest maybe 5 or 6 years in a company, get it to a certain point, and then basically exit, and then, you know, use the funds that one can get from exiting, and then invest in some more companies. So I want to continue to build my business model in that way, but right now I've sort of got enough
Yeah.
sort of
There must be
enough
people
enterprises.
interested in funding you in looking for these businesses as well. That often is the way it goes, isn't it?
Yeah, because sometimes the way it happens is that people who got funds come to me and say, "Have you got are there companies you're involved in? Would you, can we invest in them?" Which also works.
But so we talked about your Marines time, and you've still got friends from there. We're going to talk much more about that in a minute. But have you kept friends through your business career as well?
Yeah,
you have. So it's just part of your nature to be, to stay loyal and be.
Even people that I've sort of had to inverted commas sacked. I mean, many of them are still my friends because I think it's really important to treat people with respect. And some people, they might be very, very good at certain things, but they may be the wrong person at the wrong time. In a certain role, they might be fantastic at doing something else. So, I think I learned that from very, very early days in the Marines of. The team is critical. You're only as good as the team.
Yeah.
You also need to individualize the way you deal with people. Everyone's different, right? People, different folks, different strokes, as they say. And I try to put a lot of time into the one-on-one relationship as well as also building the team. So it doesn't happen just by accident.
The thing that, why I reached out to you to ask you to join is, I was really interested in your career and how it had gone from where it's gone and it's still growing. But I met Jerry, who was one of your colleagues in the Marines, I think. Right?
Yes, that's right.
You said you trained with him. So there must be some very close bonds there. Did you serve together, or did you then?
We served in the same unit actually. We went to a unit which was based out of Scotland, 4-5 Commando.
Yeah.
And so after training, we both went there.
Oh, okay.
And I kind of got to know Jerry probably better when we were serving, in that unit. And, but he was really, really passionate about his climbing. I mean, you've seen him.
Yeah, he's climbed some pretty serious mountains as a diabetic.
Yes, exactly.
Type 1 diabetic.
Yeah.
So it means he could have a diabetic attack. I don't know how you call it, things, but he could have issues at the top of the mountain. Very, very dangerous.
It's very challenging. I mean, type 1 diabetes is in a way it's a complicated condition. Yeah. And this is what really, really impressed me about Jerry was when he became a type 1 diabetic, which was in his mid-30s, which is slightly unusual. He was super fit. This wasn't to do with his lifestyle or anything, but he became a type 1 diabetic. And he was actually told by the doctor, well, you can say goodbye to your climbing days. And of course, Jerry thought, we'll see about that. And since then, he's climbed, some of the highest mountains in the world.
Is he still climbing?
He's still climbing, yeah. I mean, he was climbing, he didn't get up. He was in the Himalaya last year, trying to climb K2. He didn't make it to the top, but he had a very good stab at it. And it's really super impressive. And that inspired me, and first of all, I became aware more about type 1 diabetes because of my sort of relationship or friendship with Jerry. But he really inspired me as a person.
You don't have type 1 diabetes, but you've started a foundation, or you started it probably at the same time you went out on your own as an entrepreneur.
That's right.
And it was because of Jerry, was it?
Well, yeah. I mean, the two things happened. First of all, I was quite aware about type 1 diabetes because I knew Jerry was climbing all around the world. I understood about it from my time in the healthcare industry. But then I had a conversation which really was the tipping point with a doctor in Myanmar. We had travelled about 200 kilometres south of Yangon. And I was in a sort of equivalent to a cottage hospital, and the doctor was explaining to me that they looked after a population of 55,000 people from that hospital. There was very, very little very under-resourced sort of hospital. And he explained to me about the various conditions that they would be seeing on a daily or weekly basis.
Right.
And he mentioned diabetes a few times, and I just sort of, out of curiosity, I said, well, this is type 2 diabetes, because you could see these people, but typically they were slightly overweight and were quite old, and they had type 2 diabetes. And I said, have you ever seen a case of type 1 diabetes? And he said, we don't have type 1 diabetes in Myanmar. This is a doctor told me, we don't have type 1 diabetes in Myanmar.
But that doesn't sound.
And I realized it couldn't be possible. No. But I could understand from his perspective, he'd never seen it, he'd never come across it. So from his perspective, it just wasn't a condition that was in any way prevalent in the country. So I did some more investigation, and I found out there was 2 hospitals in Myanmar, and where they were treating, there were a handful of patients with type 1 diabetes, altogether about 20 in the whole country. Now, put it into perspective, in Myanmar's population is about 60 million people, a little bit smaller than Thailand. In Thailand, there's probably 4,000 people with type 1 diabetes. In Myanmar, there were 20.
So is that because they're dying young?
Basically, they were all dying.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and we couldn't find any adult people with type 1 diabetes in Myanmar, none whatsoever, because they all would have died. And it's normally diagnosed between the age of 5 and 15. So kids were dying before they're diagnosed, or if they're diagnosed, they would end up being diagnosed that meet the doctor would say, okay, you need to inject with insulin for the rest of your life. You'll never be cured, and you're going to have to test your blood 4 or 5 times a day, and it's going to cost you $100 a month. And they never saw the families again, because they'd go home to their villages and the kids would die.
So you decided to do something about it for children.
Yeah. So
in
basically, I then approached some of the well-known, global NGOs, UNICEF, WHO, and various others, and said, look, I found this problem. I'm prepared to do my little bit to help out, but can you help, right? And they basically said, good luck. And so I contacted Jerry and I said,
how about this,
we better
mate?
do something, because no one's going to do anything about this. And so we said, right, okay, let's do something. So we immediately, just between the two of us, started providing some insulin and blood testing equipment to the 2 hospitals.
And it must have made a difference. So you thought.
Well, now, in the country, there's over 300 diagnosed cases, and there were 20, 6 years ago.
So that's good in a way, right? It's not because there's more people with it; it's more people being treated.
Well, at least the one that they've got a much better chance of being diagnosed and then having access to free medication. So that was basically the start of Action for Diabetes, and now we have operations. We support over nearly 700 young people with type 1 diabetes. It's
extraordinary, really. How have you've gone about that the same way as you went about your military training, as you build up your career in detail, as you did at Eli Lilly in the earlier days? You've just gone about it with a kind of, well, this is the way we're going to solve this problem, I guess.
Well, one of the things I learned early on, there was a concept which we were taught in the Marines, it's called team, task, and individual. And also there's this idea of the mission, right? So this is, you put those together, and that's fundamentally how I look at things. So what is the mission, and what is the objective, and that's really important to define. What are you trying to achieve? And then to say, okay, fine, so that's the overall objective, but how are we going to do it? And then you've got to get into the details of the plan, because it won't happen through hope.
No.
Right? And there's one of my sayings, which some of the companies I involved in are probably bored of hearing, which is hope is not a strategy. And you have to have a plan, right? So your task is really important to define what are all the tasks that are going to have to happen to make this occur. And then you've got the team. How do you build up a team that can really deliver? And also, how do you work with and build up the individuals so they have the capacity and capability to execute the plan? And that basic logic and those framework I applied it to the setting up A4D. And I've applied it in the businesses I'm involved in.
What will happen with A4? You're not looking to start any more.
No, I think that's one charity is enough. I do support a few other charities, but actually setting one up, and running it.
Yeah, so you can't list a charity, can you? So you've got to get people to come in behind you.
We have some really good sort of corporations that are very generous, support us with either heavily discounted products or financial support. But my long-term mission or objective or idea for A4D is that actually by working with the government to sort of get them to a point and say, listen, we can help you to do this, but this is actually it's your responsibility.
It's your people, you've got to come up. So how many countries are you in now?
6 now.
6.
Myanmar, Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, Thailand, and Malaysia.
And one of the thing that actually made me call you up is I heard that you were planning to do a paddle down the Mekong. And,
yes.
As a fundraiser, I guess.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, that sounds brilliant, because I actually recently did a paddle along a part of the Yukon, and it was super fun. We were kind of living off the land and everything. We did 550 kilometers over about 7 days.
Basic idea would be to canoe down the Mekong from Luang Prabang, and then all the way down to Mok Dahin, which is about 1,000 kilometers.
Yeah, that's 2 weeks, 3 weeks?
Yeah, probably take about 2 weeks, but going with the flow, right?
Yeah, well, it's best not to do it the other way, right?
And I think there's a few HEP plants in Laos we'd have to navigate, but I'm talking to a guy in Laos who believes he can help organise it, so this is definitely on the agenda. Most likely it'll be 2023.
And that will be a fundraiser, so people who join you would be doing it, they'll be getting people to support them.
Yeah, we would use the same model we use. We've done quite a lot of cycle rides. So
you've got one coming up in the north of Thailand this year.
That's right. We're going to cycle, it's probably going to be 20-25 folks cycling from Chiang Mai up to Mae Hei Song, and then down the Burmese border, and then they cycle up Doi Intanon.
That's a bit
which is quite high.
Right?
It's going to be quite demanding. It's about 600 650 kilometers, 13,000 meters of climbing, which is like, you know, I mean, Everest is 8,000 meters, put it like that, so, or over 8,000 meters.
A couple of Everest.
It's a couple of Everest. And the way we do that is that we ask the cyclists, okay, you come, you pay your way, and then in that case, every kilometer you cycle, raise $1. And some of them will raise
more than
£10,000. I mean, $10,000.
Do you have the 25 people you need, or are you still
not
looking
yet?
for people?
So we actually
when we put this video up, can we put a link to say
yes,
if you're interested?
Absolutely, that'd be great.
Can you put me on your list for the people to kayak down? I've got
You're on the list.
A bit like you. I mean, a bit like you. I've got a friend from school. Actually, we grew up in the same street in London as 10-year-olds. And so every 2 years we do a sort of adventure trek together somewhere in the world. So
yeah.
I told him about it. He's dead keen to come over and try it as well.
Well,
So
you'll be the first two to sign up.
You've got 2 people, yeah. Well, it's been really fantastic talking to you. I hope. Well, I've certainly learned a lot about your commitment to what you're doing. But I hope some younger people who this is a bit different to what we normally do, but because you're giving some really interesting information about building a career, relationships with your colleagues, relationships with people around you, and also at the same time finding a reason to, with a diabetes program as well, to give back to society. So thanks for sparing time.
Yeah, my pleasure.
It's been lovely talking to you, and I hope to see you on the Mekong.
Right, let's get paddling.
All right. Cheers.
Cheers. Thanks, Nigel.
Yeah, pleasure.